Prova, 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 prova. Un, deux. Je vais parler en français, comme ça je serai. J'aurai pas de concurrence sur. Ah, si, si, je vois que j'ai de la concurrence. Um, you want. You keep this one, or you want this one? Do you want the wheelchair, or do you want? It's okay to go. It's more difficult to get out of it.
You let me know, huh?
What for?
That you want to change the
You
tune.
can talk to the people.
Do you like it?
Yeah, probably. Hide them at the back here. I just turned the phone off here. Yeah, yeah. It's got that paper of Dudley in there somewhere.
Can we put it in the opposite?
Yeah, there you go, this one.
No?
This one?
This one is a paper out there.
Okay.
She must have chucked it in the bin. I think that's it. Yeah.
That earring.
Yeah.
There we go. We've got it.
This one, I'll keep it over there.
Yeah, go. Don't run away with it. Take
We need
that
to
over
try.
there too.
We need to try with the micro. Do you see your paper?
Yeah, so what? Testing?
Yes, this one is okay.
Yeah.
For me, it's okay.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Sister.
And then we found God in nature at the end. The painting. That's your way of doing it. Putting religion and faith into the terms of we found God in nature. So that's where you do theology. But that's at the end, I thought. But if I can just ask you some questions and tell us about tell us about the big part of this thing. Big part of religious listening. Tell us about the big part. And I'll throw in some words from other places to back you up. So if we break it up, it's not read right through. And I'll try and lead you according to. I think this is the same, is it? Yeah, it's the same. I've got this. This relates to the question. So I'll just lead. Do you want another tissue? You all right?
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and welcome to UISG, the International Union of Superiors General, our headquarters here in Rome. And I want to welcome Ambassador Chiara Porro, the staff of the embassy, ambassadors from various embassies, including my own, Irish ambassador to the Holy See, I think there's a representative from the Embassy of Morocco here, and friends. It's important that we're gathered here during this Reconciliation Week in Rome. And we're so delighted to welcome you, Dr. Miriam Rose Ungamar Bowman, here to UISG, for this important conversation on the theme of an Indigenous perspective on integral ecology, the concept of Dadiri. We hope that you feel truly welcome here and at home. And we know that your presence here is an honour and a gift to us. And as the headquarters of Catholic Sisters worldwide, we know that we have made mistakes in the past in relation to respecting and learning from Aboriginal cultures, including your deep spirituality and traditions. And I always say we beg forgiveness for our mistakes and our failures, and we're learning. And we know that hearing you speak here personally will help in our journey of appreciating different cultures. Having spent some time myself learning and living with the Lakota Sioux people in the United States, I know how much we have to learn. Today, we know you will teach us much as you engage in conversation with Sister Adele Howard, or SM, whom we also warmly welcome to UISG. Finally, before handing over to Sister Adele and others, I would like to welcome the new Secretary General of Caritas Internationalis, Alistair Dutton. Welcome you here to UISG and to Rome indeed. We look forward to working with you in the future, and I'd like to invite you here to say a few words to us as we begin. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Sister Pat. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends, good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here. You've got me on day 4 in the job, so if I look slightly unsure of where I should be or what I should do, I will get the hang of it sooner or later. But I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted that Caritas is part of this event today, discussing the Indigenous perspectives on integral ecology and the concept of Dadari. And I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about what the concept of Dadari really entails. I'd like to begin by thanking the Australian Embassy to the Holy See for organising the event and extending the collaboration to Caritas Internationalis. And particular thanks goes to Ambassador Chiara Porotto from the Australian Embassy. If I didn't pronounce that right, that's one of the things I will have to get right as I learn. But the thanks is sincerely meant if the pronunciation is poor. Needless to say, particular recognition and gratitude goes to Dr. Miriam Rose. And I had the great pleasure of hearing Dr. Miriam Rose the other evening in the Vatican Museums when she talked about her artwork, both the painting that was unveiled the other evening and the chasuble of, I've forgotten Father's name actually, Father Brendan, and this piece of art which was on the chasuble that was hanging there that evening. And I think one couldn't help but be moved, Dr. Miriam Rose, as you spoke, by the way you grounded us all back in the present with an invocation to be still and to hear the sounds of the earth and the sounds of the creation that we're situated amongst. Your profound commitment, despite all the challenges you face, to devote time and energy to serving and practicing the concept of Dadari is appreciated by many, and as I say, I look forward to hearing more about it. For us in Caritas, working all around the world. And I'm sure all of the congregations who are here will have as broad experience. But time and time again, we see the special connection that Indigenous people have with their lands. And when we take the time to slow down and listen, we can understand, recapture some of what went before that in our busy lives we have lost. And it is those busy lives and what we have lost that is creating the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor that Pope Francis exhorts us to pay attention to. And I think your work in that, Dr. Miriam Rose, is a really salient and timely challenge to us all. As people of faith, Christians throughout the world, but within Caritas Internationalis, we all firmly believe in that incarnate, inherent dignity and worth of every individual. And I think, just as Sister Pat said, we have to acknowledge that at times in history, our behaviour has not done justice to that inherent dignity and worth. And for all our part in that, echoing Sister Pat's words, we do have to beg for forgiveness. And we have to learn now, and we have to look at how we build a more just world. A more just world that does justice for peoples of all backgrounds, and that incorporates a really integrated, vibrant sense of integral ecology as well. Just speaking very briefly for Caritas Australia, who I'd like to bring into the room, although they're not here themselves. But the Indigenous voice, this is their words really, the Indigenous voice represents a powerful and necessary stride towards rectifying the systemic and historical injustices endured by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Again, I apologise for the pronunciation. For far too long, your voices have been marginalised and rights have been disregarded. From Caritas's perspective, it's imperative that they are actively involved, that you are actively involved and consulted in all decisions, in the processes and the content of decisions, particularly on matters that have significant effect on your lives. We believe in the inclusion and we believe that inclusion and representation are essential for genuine progress and the pursuit of justice. And so it's really that this event is an opportunity to create awareness globally about the importance of Indigenous spirituality, traditional knowledge, and environmental justice, and to see how those all come together so richly in your traditions. And it's a special occasion to encourage profound changes in the way the Church can accompany and respond to the signs of the present times as they threaten or affect the future of Indigenous peoples and your cultures. And that puts future generations at risk. So, Dr. Miriam Rose, I look forward to hearing more from you today. You really lit the touch paper the other day, so I'm waiting for the fireworks now. Thank you, Sister Pat, and to Chiara for inviting me to be here today. And it's a great pleasure to see so many of you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I want to begin by thanking Sister Pat and all the team here at UISG for their immense generosity in helping us plan for today's event. UISG has long demonstrated a strong commitment and leadership on issues such as integral ecology, and the Australian Embassy to the Holy See is proud to have collaborated with you on so many related initiatives over the years that I've been here and before. I think the dialogue this afternoon is proof of our ever stronger partnership, And I want to take this opportunity again to also thank everyone behind the scenes who has helped today. We're also delighted to be partnering with Caritas on this event, and it's a real pleasure to have with us the new Secretary General, welcome to Rome, but also Musamba Mubanga, the Senior Advocacy Officer for Security and Climate Change at Caritas Internationalis. Caritas showed tremendous enthusiasm as well when we first talked about the possibility of partnering on this event, and Caritas takes action every day to provide relief to those in need, and they know that climate change is having an enormous impact on the world's most vulnerable. So we look forward to hearing from Musamba at the end, who will share a few reflections with us as well. I should begin by saying that this week has been like no other week at the Embassy to the Holy See, thanks to you, Miriam. We've been very proud to welcome Dr. Miriam Rose to Rome, and we've been already hugely inspired by her reflections on themes ranging from education and art, and of course to the environment and spirituality. Today's conversation is intended to provide an insight into Dr. Miriam Rose's perspective as an Aboriginal elder, an educator, and an artist on the theme of caring for our common home. And to really get a sense of this, she will tell us how her Catholic faith, her spirituality, and the practice of the concept of dadiri all converge to form a unique worldview and a sacred connection to the land. We're holding today's conversation with the firm belief that human diversity is one of the strongest assets we have in our battle against the climate crisis. Having just concluded the Laudato Si week, it feels pertinent to remind ourselves of some of Pope Francis's words on this point. He tells us that given the complexity of the ecological crisis and its multiple causes, we need to realize that the solutions will not emerge from just one way of interpreting and transforming reality. Respect must also be shown for the various cultural riches of different peoples, their art and poetry, their interior life and spirituality. If we are truly concerned to develop an ecology capable of remedying the damage we have done, no branch of the sciences and no form of wisdom can be left out, and that includes religion and the language particular to it. Pope Francis calls on us to seek out different perspectives, to exclude nobody in this conversation. Australia is very conscious of the need to listen to our Indigenous peoples, our First Nations, of whom there is so much to learn, and with whom we can work effectively to design strategies to counter the effects of climate change. Indigenous practices are an untapped resource when it comes to environmental management. Our First Nations were the traditional custodians of our land, and through thousands of years of knowledge building, they developed reliable techniques to address the threats to Australia's fragile biodiversity. Their expertise can be applied in large-scale measures, from wildfire prevention to water infrastructure planning. In this line, the Australian government has made a commitment to, for example, doubling the number of Indigenous bushrangers, or supporting First Nations land management projects using traditional knowledge and cultural practices. We also want to empower First Nations leadership on designing adaptive action. Apologies. So to lead us into today's discussion with Dr. Miriam Rose, I'm delighted also to welcome an energetic, committed and unwavering collaborator of ours, Sister Adele Howard, who travelled from Australia especially to be here with us this week. A member of the Sisters of Mercy, Sister Adele works in advisory and communication roles with groups in the education, community and religious life sectors, helping her develop a deep understanding of integral ecology. Sister Adele is an experienced educator, practical theologian, presenter and digital media producer with advanced qualifications in theology and in media arts. She's an honorary fellow of the Australian Catholic University in the Faculty of Theology and Philosophy. Sister Adele has recently been working with the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development as the Oceania lead on the project Doing Theology from the Existential Peripheries. Indeed, some of you might remember that back in November, at the launch of the Sisters for the Environment statement we held here, we screened a video with testimonies from a range of voices from the Pacific, which were gathered by Sister Adele precisely to raise questions around spiritual connection to land and the urgency of the climate crisis. So I want to thank you, Sister Adele, for agreeing to facilitate this event. And without further ado, I'll hand over to you to lead us into this conversation with Dr. Miriam Rose. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chiara. And hello, everyone. Buongiorno. Lovely to be here, and what a privilege for me to be sitting with Miriam Rose in this year of 2023, because 37 years ago, we both sat under a jacaranda tree in the north of Australia in the cathedral grounds in Darwin on a hot May night, so literally May, 37 years ago. And I was a very nervous researcher trying to understand what it meant to be a Christian in Australia, and how could we learn from Indigenous Australians to be true to ourselves and who we are meant to be. So I went to Miriam before she began to give this talk on the early Didiri concept, and I asked her, could I record her talk? And she graciously said yes. And 2 weeks ago in Melbourne, Australia, at my home, I found the tape. It's digitised, and it will be of value, I think, to Miriam in the future. But how life turns, a circle of 37 years and two older women, having made separate journeys in those 37 years, me still trying to understand what God is up to in the land of Australia, and me very genuinely trying to search to understand the action of the Creator Spirit in our lives as non-Indigenous people, but learning every day with joy and with struggle and heartache and heartbreak sometimes, as I'm being shaped in my understanding by the insights of Indigenous elders such as Miriam Rose and many others around the country. And I say that by way of introduction to say that we've both been on the road of trying to teach for many years, but Miriam Rose is coming here to teach us today, and all I want to do is facilitate the wisdom that she can share with you. And it's not all I want to do, it's what I'm privileged having been asked to do. So Miriam Rose, your country, your community, I believe is named after deep water sounds. And to help us understand that, your people made a video. And I thought we might start by playing that short video so that we can see Miriam walking in country and being immersed in that land that is home and home to the Creator Spirit. Is that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, John Luca.
To know me is to breathe with me. To breathe with me is to listen deeply. To listen deeply is to connect. It's a sound, the sound of deep calling to deep. Dadidi, the deep inner spring inside us. We call on it, and it calls on us. We are river people. We cannot hurry the river. We need to move with the current and understand its ways. We wait for the rain to fill our rivers and water our thirsty earth. We watch our bush foods and wait for them to open before we gather them. We wait for our young people as they grow. The time for rebirth is now. If our culture is alive and strong and respected, it will grow. It will not die, and our spirit will not die. I believe that the spirit of Dadidi that we have to offer will blossom and grow, not just within ourselves, but in our whole nation.
Well, thank you for that beautiful insight into your land, your country, your people.
They're my
Perhaps-
grandchildren.
Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about that actual movie and what was going on. Interpret it for us, because for many of us,
Well, the
it's
kids in there,
not
there's
known.
two. They're my grandkids.
They're your
The one that
grandkids.
had her tongue pulled out, going like that.
Your grand.
My
Daughter.
sister's granddaughter, and the little fella that's playing in the mud is my grandson, Kurt.
So tell us about Dadidi,
Daddy,
please.
and thought it'd be a good way of trying to describe to you what Dadadi's about,
Mm.
and it's a good way of trying to help you understand, as in having things of nature, and you know.
Yes, yes.
I can't teach you Dadadi. You have to feel open. You know, like when I talk about Dadadi is inner deep listening and quite still awareness, you've got to be open to what is written here.
And you would see much of the world is exactly the opposite.
Yes. I got a shock when I come here, and because I live with nature and I'm part of nature in a way, we wouldn't be here with you now, or I wouldn't be here with you now, or even the people that you know in Australia. Because for the past 60 or more thousand years or more, we had to understand its way to be able to survive and live. And they're my people who have done this. They didn't have any money. There was no supermarket. So they had to understand seasons as well. And that's a story up there. We're in the dry season now, behind you, sister.
Yes.
And 4 different sections of the dry season that's upon us now in the community of Daly River, where I come from. And the dragonflies, when they come in, fly in everywhere to the community, and everywhere we know that they're telling us the dry season's coming, and it's the end of the wet season. So down the bottom with the yellow colours down below the dragonflies are the winds coming, and then up the top there's raindrops, they're going away. And then because we had the wet season before the dry, the river is still full of whatever, whenever it was flooded, but not dangerously, but just a lot of water from the rain and from the creeks that run into the river. And then because of the rain's gone now, the river's starting to recede, and then there's runoffs. And I was saying yesterday to some people, I can't remember, but anyway, I said, it's that time of the year where a lot of people, my people, tourists from wherever, come, and Daly's really famous for that sort of thing, as in fishing for barramundi. And barramundi is lovely to eat, the fish, and when it's cooked, that is, Iggy. And that's the photo of the barra there, or the painting. And the next one is, again, because the rain's gone, the land's starting to dry a lot with the dry weather winds, dry season winds. We can go and burn off country, as in our homelands, ancestral land, that is. And that's the fire. And then down the bottom again, we have a lot of waterways. We call them billabongs. And we're on the edge of the floodplain. The land is, and we're bordered by mountains, like, I know the mountains here are a bit far away, because I flew over them coming here to you, but they were covered with snow. But yeah, we're bordered by mountains, and then from where the mountains are is where the community is at the base of it, and then about 3 or 4 hours downstream, because the river runs out into the ocean. It's flat all the way, and floodplains, and there's a lot of billabongs. Do you know what billabongs are? No? They're like water holes. And there's water lilies and turtles and crocodiles. We walk in the water ankle deep or knee deep and try and pick the lilies that grow there to eat about this time, and also catch turtles with their bare hands. But if you're frightened to do that, you just chuck a line in. But there's crocodiles in there too.
You were saying yesterday, Miriam Rose, that all that country that you described to us, you were telling us some of the stories that connect with the dreaming stories of that country, like that next layer that you teach us about. Can you give us some examples of, the mighty Daly River, your river there in your community? You were talking about welcoming people to country when they came to visit. Mm-hmm. And I just loved the way you talked about the water and what you did there, as well as the fun you had with them. But the connection with country and the deeper layer of the story of the river and the sacredness of it.
The water is life-giving, and if you come to Daly, we welcome you into the land. So it's also part of having a safe journey through the land. It's like you welcoming me to your home. So we take you to the river, and as I was saying too, not jokingly, but I do say these things to people when they come, because we have lots of students come from southern states, from Catholic schools, public schools, even adults come and visit on tours, and mainly the adults, I tease them and say, but they don't know that I'm mucking around, but don't take my word for Bible. I tell them, when we go to the river, you got to take your shoes and leave your belonging here, and then swim from this bank to that bank, and you come back. If you come back, you can have them, but if you don't come back, that thing there that you left on the sand, I'm going to take. Like if it's a car key, purse, wallet, whatever, mobile phones. Yep. And they all stand there and not sure whether if they should walk in the water or not. Get in there. Now get them to stand ankle deep. And we splash water on the crown of their head and on their navel. The crown of the head for wisdom and knowledge, and splash water on your navel. That's where you're connected to your mother, I say to them, before you come out into the well. And water is life-giving. It's like your mum gave you life to come out into the well. And the river, because it flows out into the ocean, your presence is carried through the land. And then our ancestors are being acknowledged of your presence.
Thank you. Beautiful story, because it reveals to us how you're looking at everything naturally, whereas we have to learn it, like another layer of learning. And you are a teacher and have been a teacher all your life and a principal. But you were saying the other night at the Vatican Museum, you teach through your art at times too. And this beautiful painting you've just spoken about, you called the painting, perhaps you could tell us the name of the painting and a little bit about it. The name, We Found God in Nature.
That it there or no, that one?
Yes. So we found God in nature was
Yeah,
what,
We
yes.
found God in nature. I got sick and tired of people asking me at conferences. I travelled throughout Australia to various conferences. And this question, some of the questions are asked, when you have Q&A time after a talk. And mind you, one of the questions that was asked that is in my head is at Catholic University in Sydney. And the question was, how did your people accept Christianity? And I said, we found God in nature. And they're mumbling away in the corner. I can hear him just. And then saying that, I thought we found God in nature. We brought God over in the boat with us when we migrated to Australia. And I said, yeah, right. Yeah.
And that's so important, what you've just said, because that's probably, in terms of Pope Francis talking about Laudato Si and integral ecology, he's trying to teach us everything is connected. God is not absent from the natural world and creation.
Mm-hmm.
You know that, and we need a lot of awareness of your understanding of that if we are to truly act against global warming, climate change, because we need to integrate the understanding of God's presence in all of creation.
Yes.
And I think your stories, your art, your teaching helps me to draw closer to that integral understanding of God present in everything. And I know that some of the other dreaming stories that you've told give clues to that. But perhaps to return to examples of the deep listening that you've developed in your concept of Dadari. The deep listening, the quiet listening, but also too the waiting, the stillness. So they go together, as I understand it. Is that right? The listening and then the
Being still.
waiting, the quiet awareness, stillness. Do you want to say a little bit more to teach us about those two dimensions of Dadari?
If we lose a loved one, I think I understand how Westerners, when it's to have a funeral of a loved one, they organise a date and a place where they want to have the ceremony, as in church, and then they have the funeral, or they have the ceremony, then they have the burial, and then a wake, and that's it. I mean, if it is a loved one, the sadness takes a long time for it to go away, or you still carry that
Yes.
hurt, you know.
Yes.
And for us, we own our griefs. It's longer than what you do. There's certain ceremonies that have got to take place after a loved one had passed. And then, like with after the funeral, we've got to smoke the house out that that person was living in, have a ceremony of smoking the living quarters or the house, so that the family of that deceased can come back and live again in that house. And it's just sending the spirit to wherever the spirits go. And and then the belongings, that might be a year before we burn the belongings of the deceased person, family member. And they could be clothes and swag, yeah. And then if that person was married, or whether if it was a man that passed or a woman, she or he can be free then to go and marry someone else.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And,
So you take the
It
time.
takes a while, yeah.
You take the time.
Yes.
Yeah. So connection comes to mind. You're talking about connecting with all that's around you, the community, what's going on in the community, and taking the time to attend to what is actually going on.
Yes. I mean, that's just one example,
Yes.
yeah. And
Do you
it
have some others?
involves stillness, waiting,
Yes.
and then just being silent as much as, oh, you're going to ask me about silent?
I was, yes.
Yeah, go.
Because once again, all these things that you're talking about and sharing, in my experience, there's a very big lack of them in our society, well, in the world that I live in. And, I think the science people are telling us now, they've explored cosmology and all sorts of scientific understandings of how we are to save the planet and be together in harmony, but it's not working. As you see and I see, it's not working. And when I listen to you speak and when I read what you've written, that attending to what is really important, the listening, the silence, the working out, taking time to work out what is really important. What is the Spirit up to here? What is the Creator Spirit working with us to say and do? Surely we can see that we need to try this way, because the ways we've been trying are not working. And once again, I think that's integral ecology, listening to the voice of the Spirit in the stillness and silence as you're teaching us, as well as doing the practical when we are clear about what the practical action has to be. But if we don't do the listening, the practical action won't be effective.
Mm-hmm.
We know that. So tell me a bit more about your understanding of contemplation or that listening, the silence.
We have stakeholders, service providers, whichever word you want to use, come in from outside, and they're people from down south and from various states in Australia or wherever, and work amongst us and then run certain things with our local mob people. And we say to them, even teachers when they come, or principals, because I work with the Catholic education in Darwin, and we go and talk to new teachers at the beginning of the year. you know, at orientation and meet them and speak to them and say, you know, you've got to, they probably don't know how to work with our kids and our people, but they've got to listen because we just don't let them work in the classrooms on their own. During work time, we have a local person working with that male teacher or that female teacher or the principal. I'm in the Catholic leadership team, along with 4 others, and we work with the principal and the senior teachers in the school and support them and help them. And then we all forever always talking to them. Listening is really important. Even to the children in front of you in a classroom, they've got to listen to them, and then the children have got to listen to the teachers. And that's why we've got our people working in the classroom with the new teachers. You know
Very
what I mean?
Very good.
So everyone's learning from each other.
Yeah, two-way learning.
Yes, and you know, if we're gonna grow up, when I'm talking about the young ones, when they grow up, they've also got to learn, because they've got a non-Indigenous person in a classroom, and they're learning Western education, and then there's always Aboriginal education that go in hand. They've got to be made strong in who they are, and they belong, what language they belong to, what homeland they come from, kind of thing. And that has to help strengthen and make the young people confident in who they are, where they belong, and then also the teachers understanding that,
Yes.
and then understanding the Western way of things. You know,
Yes.
if they're being taught by a non-Indigenous teacher about English, writing, whatever, history, and you know, I've been talking about when I was growing up, the nuns were always saying to me, "You've got to learn to walk in 2 wells."
Yeah.
And here I am.
And you know,
Learn
Miriam,
to speak your language.
yes.
Have you? No?
Miriam,
No, but yeah.
it's wonderful that you've just said what you've said about the sisters teaching you to walk in, you have to walk in 2 worlds, because we're sitting here in the offices of where the sisters from around the world meet.
Mhm.
And
Oh my
so that's a beautiful story. Thank you for that, because it gives me heart that those dear sisters, those years ago, there in your community, understood
Mhm.
a little of what their challenge was and
I
what
hope
their
so, yeah.
gift was. And you've remembered them so many years later, so thank you for that story
Mhm.
in this UISG building. They'd be so proud, wouldn't they?
They must
Yes.
be moving around in their grave. No, poor things.
Yes, two-way learning. I think that's something that many teachers in Australia who've gone out to remote communities and particularly and worked with the communities there, the Indigenous communities, they've had to learn that. And you, of course, have been the great leader in that, particularly as principal of St Francis Xavier's in Niue. So education, you've always believed to be key to help the next generation take their place.
Well, that
And-
was all brand new kind of thing for us in the community. You know, it started in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s sort of thing, you know.
Yeah.
And I was new to my people, and they even used to pull me up and say, "What are you doing? Why are you teaching the kids how to paint or telling them stories? How come you can have all the kids in the classroom and talk to them?" And I said, "I'm learning, I'm teaching them things that I've learned from being a teacher in how to teach them the Western way, and then interpreting a lot of things that have come from the curriculum, you know, that's out there, and then also teaching them things you've taught me when I was growing up. So there's no difference. But everything that was new to our people, elders, they still questioned and wanted to know what was going on and what is that we were doing. Even if our mob have been trained to be health workers in our clinic.
Yes.
Yes. Or doing the sport and rec, or working in the admin, or working in the shop. Yeah, marketing. Yeah.
So you played an important role in bridging the gap of understanding, or
Yes.
being a bridge for
I
your
had to.
community with the Western world.
Yes.
Yes.
And I said, not made me, but I used to sit with you around a campfire at night, and you used to talk to me and the rest of my family, or cousins, sisters, brothers, and tell us all these things. So I'm passing on the Dreamtime stories. Where the special places are, where are the sacred places? Whether they're public ones or non-public. These kids have got to know. They'll get into trouble if they walk into a place where they're not allowed to go to,
Yes.
that sort of thing. And they're not with us in the village now. They're in the classrooms every day, during the weekdays. And it was before the sisters come to set up school, I spent a lot of time with you as I was growing up, and I was about 3, 4 years old and all that sort of thing. And doing all of that, listening to our elders.
Yeah.
But now I'm passing on what you've told me to the young ones in there.
And they obviously came to see that was the right way to go.
Yes, and I started getting the elders into coming to the school too and working with us, with the children.
So, of course, what you're talking about too is respect for culture and law
Yes.
in a way that we don't know as outsiders, but that you've held that together and cultivated and supported that, and it's still strong in your community. And I think that's extraordinary. Thank you for the leadership.
It is important. We've got the linguist to come from Armidale, New South Wales, and help us. He's learnt, a couple of them have learnt to speak our languages and then helped us write our language. We've got dictionaries now, and we can use that as teaching aids for our kids to read and write our language and all that.
Can you tell us the name of your language, please? I can't say it.
Ngangi,
Nungi
Kurungur.
Kurungu.
Yeah, that's
Nungi
one
Kurungu.
language. My mum's language, I speak that more than my own language, but I can speak it as well. It's Ngangi Womiri.
Nungi Womadi.
And they're the two languages that I've got here, where Darari comes from. Ngangi Kurungur and Ngangi Womiri. I think further down the pages.
Yeah, and it means, you teach me
Ngangi Kurungur means, what is it?
word or sound
Deep water sounds.
and deep water. Yeah.
Ngangi Kurungur, language of the deep.
And is that because the Daly River runs close by and the sense of water being life-giving, as you say?
Yes.
And the depth being the listening at great depth?
Yes. Sorry, yeah. Didn't realise this thing got loud. Yeah. Yes.
Well, Mary Rose, we could talk all day, but I think we've learnt a lot.
Do you
And
wanna ask
there is some
question?
time for questions.
Yeah.
But are you all right if we...
Yeah, no,
Just-
okay.
Good. Let's just take a few minutes then. Yes.
me as you were talking was a lived sense of that deep, patient listening. Not just a practice, but a way that you carry yourself, the way you, the way you convey yourself and you engage. So I guess my question is, I only arrived in Rome again, came back to Rome on Monday, and there are few cities in the world quite as hustly and bustly as Rome. So how do you maintain that sense of deep, quiet, patient listening when the world around you is at a very different pace?
I'm glad you asked that question. No, it's all good.
It's on now.
I'm glad you.
Okay,
I'm
we're on.
glad you asked that question. Can you hear me?
Okay, now.
Yeah. Because was having that difficulty too, and I kept asking him, and your what's her name? Hey? Andre, and Iggy, and David, and Kiara, take me to the sea, take me to the river. I wanted to connect. Because all around you, here, side by side, concrete walls everywhere.
Yes.
And they kept telling me, especially Iggy, you dig under there where the ruin is, there's another building down there, true. Off from in the past, you know.
But I must
And-
smile, Miriam, when I think about the oldest buildings in this city of Rome are still young compared with the length of your culture in terms of Australia. 60,000 years of lived culture and reflection on the revelation of our God as creator, spirit in the land of Australia. I mean, that's an amazing reality. So these buildings, a lot of concrete, a lot of stone, but fairly new.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that you can't really get the feel of nature, you know what I mean?
Not easily, no.
And then I just go and sit next to a pot plant, you know where I'm staying? No, but yeah, there's that thing, I think.
Yeah.
Just on the comment about the pot plant, and it's a very different context. But I visited Tigray in northern Ethiopia, where the war has been for the last 2.5 years. And one of the sisters working there, and they lived under siege for 2 years, but it was the pot plant she went and sat by that kept her rooted for the whole time. So it is the pot plants.
Anyone else with a question? Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for being here in Rome amidst the hustle and bustle this week. I'm from Canada, and we have a very difficult, often tragic, complicated relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous, in which the Church has been involved in very negative ways for centuries, but where we're trying to turn a page in the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and the Church is trying to play its role, and Pope Francis coming last year was also part of that process of healing and reconciliation. What would you have to say with your experience, the two of you, also from your different perspectives, but also from your experience of trying to build friendship and relationship as Indigenous, but also as non-Indigenous? What are some insights or some wisdom that you could share for a situation like ours in Canada, so that we can also learn from some of the good things that have happened in Australia?
The Jesuits have been around in the region, in the area where I live. I mean, I wasn't born then. It was in the 1800s. And they worked with my people, and there were 3 stations that they set up. And Donald McKillop, Mary McKillop's brother, was the head, and he was a Jesuit, and worked with his group, with my people. And then because of the remoteness, I think it was 3 or 4 years, Frank was saying, Frank Brennan, he's here in Rome with us. And where? Oh, there you am. Sorry, I didn't see you. Yeah, then they left because Mary McKillop was going to come too, but never made it, poor thing. And there was then nothing left there for people to continue what they've learnt from the missionaries. And they asked the church in Darwin to send missionaries out, and bought farm off a farmer and started building houses and school. And I was going to school. A lot of them were nurses and teachers and builders, mechanics, like the brothers and the priest, and the nuns were the nurses and the teachers. So it was good that they came. And the Catholic Church still owns the land that we're on. It's about 4,000 hectares. Everybody's gone now, after all this time, the missionaries, except for a parish priest that's there with us all the time. And then if he's away for family reasons or a bit of a break from us, the bishop from Darwin can come. So there's 2 bishops, Hurley and Gauchi. Yeah, bishop. Yeah. So they can come at different times when a priest needs a break, or another priest comes and stays with us, and that's all. All the nuns are gone. And then the Mother Teresa mob. Mother Teresa's group, they're up in Darwin, and Catherine, just along the highway further down, and they come now and again to visit the people as well. So, there's still that good relationship with the church amongst us at home, and I suppose everywhere in the territory. There could be people that are saying not so good things about the church, but with a lot of the communities, we've got 4 Catholic communities, the Tiwi Islands, Santa Teresa down in the Santa, Alice Springs too, Wadair is Port Keats in the territory. We're all in the territory, and Daly, where I come from. This church is strong. Someone was having something on, I think a video earlier on, and they said that the biggest Aboriginal, like population-wise, as in being baptised Catholics, is Wadair. Yeah. And that's just across the river from us, about 3 hours away.
And the distances are vast, aren't they?
Yes.
Yes. But you're from Canada, you would understand that. Big distances wouldn't be new to you between communities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I suppose across the country, like Canada, we've had our heartbreaks and our admitting where we made many mistakes over the years in different places. This is the church. I know many, many sisters who have worked very hard with great joy in many remote and challenging communities across the years, and they've had great life experiences and great learning and have passed that on. So there's a very positive story out there as well. And that's not to deny the reality of the things that went wrong across church communities in Australia. But I think Miriam Rose has just given us examples of positive experiences. And we'll leave it at that in terms of respecting her stories while acknowledging there are other stories. And then there are many, many in between. People giving their lives, their energy, and gaining much. Everyone that I know that's ever worked in an Aboriginal community who's part of religious life they always say they learn so much more and they are more enriched by anything, much more enriched themselves than anything they could ever have given. It's the learning and the breaking open of one's heart to a deeper awareness of the land and its power as sacred. And that's the gift Aboriginal people are giving us in Australia. If we can stop rushing, if we can learn to sit and listen, as Miriam's saying, and to respect the wisdom and the teaching of 60,000 years of reflected revelation of what our Creator Spirit is up to in our land. Another question before we finish?
They know everything. No.
Okay. Any last thing you'd like to say?
Yeah, it was, I mean, if there's no any other questions, all I'm saying now is thank you for having me here, but this was interesting for me to come. And I was a bit standoffish at first when the invitation came. Was it from you? From Kiara? And I think it was just a payback thing because she come up and visited us in my community at Daly River. And it was my turn to come up here and see you all and say hello and learn about what you do and show me around. It was very interesting places where I've always heard about or read about or seen on documentaries, you know, where particularly the saints were buried also, or killed or died. And I was at the Jesuit church, right, Father, today with Father Frank for the anniversary of his dad. And he's telling us about that church, St. Ignatius and Francis Xavier. We're part of that church, and I think Ignatius is buried there, Father. Yep, I think that's what he said. And then he told us, oh, see that glass case in there, behind that altar? Yeah, what? And he said, see the arm? Oh, it's just a skeleton of Francis Xavier's arm in it. And you can see it from a distance, sort of thing. You couldn't go in there to check him out. But it was great that I went there and seen those things, you know, personally, because my school's St. Francis Xavier in the community at home. And the church is St. Francis as well. So it's interesting and lovely. The only reason why I didn't want to come was because of the distance and the plane, Darwin, Perth, London, Rome.
But you made it, thank God.
Yeah.
It's been...
And thank you for showing how interested you are in what it is. It's not every day that you see an Aboriginal person in Rome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Miriam.
Okay.
Thank you, Miriam Rose.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would want to re-echo the words of the Secretary General in thanking the Australian Embassy to the Holy See for organizing this event and extending the collaboration to Caritas Internationalis. And to Dr. Mariam Rose, your passion and experience in talking about different angles on this subject is highly appreciated and admired. And we also appreciate your efforts in fundraising for Caritas Australia. And please, don't stop looking for the Caritas man. Before getting into my message, I would like to begin by quoting the words of Sabrina Stevens, a Kukuku Yalanji and Jidinji woman from far north Queensland and a youth participant coordinator at Caritas Australia. And I begin the quote. As an Australian Aboriginal woman, I was raised with the knowledge that we maintain our culture by nurturing our relationship with the country, and in turn, we are looking after one another. And this cycle goes on to repeat itself. This belief was naturally affirmed throughout my faith journey when giving thanks to God, the Creator, for the wisdom we receive from His sacred gift of creation and in the love we share. When I am feeling discontent, unease, or loss of direction, I am drawn to be outside, submerged in nature, to be still and feel God's love for me. His love is expressed in all that simply is: the plants, a flower, the animals in their natural habits, the warmth of the sun on my face, or the whispers of a gentle breeze running across my skin. Being in nature is where I feel closest to God. Giving the greatest strength and connection to my faith, I feel passionately obliged to care for God's gift of creation, which nurtures the connection between my Aboriginal culture and spirituality. End of quote. Sabrina also makes the point that in Laudato Si, Pope Francis acknowledges that Indigenous communities should be primary dialogue partners in conversations of ecological justice, particularly where their own land and waterways are connected. To expand on this, she calls for new dialogue and new ways of looking after each other and our common home. And she points to two things. Firstly, listening to and learning from one another as essential to building any relationship. Then a conversation of ecological dialogue as a good place to start. She then points and reminds everyone that nature is always speaking to us. We just need to learn different ways of listening and hearing so we can act with love and respect to care for our common home. To that effect, and based on this quotation, I would like to share one important example of integral ecology in practice on the work undertaken in the cultural beginning of the Aboriginal Carbon Foundation, a partner of Caritas Australia. This speaks to the concepts of carbon farming and cultural beginning. These practices are age-old techniques used by first Australian traditional custodians to care for the land. Caritas Australia collaborates with Aboriginal Carbon Foundation, who support first Australian communities to practice and benefit from using these traditional techniques. Important from these practices are the social, emotional, economic benefits reaped by the communities conducting these technologies. With that said, let me also share a Caritas perspective from another part of the world. And this is from the Latin America, which shares the same perspective as the Oceania region. As you all may be aware, today the Amazon is wounded, its beauty deformed, a place of pain and violence. The diverse destruction of human and environmental life, pollution of rivers and lands, burning of trees, the massive loss of biodiversity, the disappearance of species, which constitute a brutal reality that challenges all of us. And as they would make reference to it now, these are their words. For a moment, we are a new Amazonia people without land, forests, and water. And in further sharing a quote from Claudia, a teacher at the Caritas Supported Cultural Center program in Manaus, which is the city's first indigenous settlement, says, "I really want the kids not to lose touch with their roots." The case studies from Latin America and the Caribbean focus on protecting human rights of indigenous communities. And with this, Caritas Latin America and the Caribbean, working with communities, is placed at the service of the people of the Pan-Amazon and seeks to support and defend their territories, and also defending their right to effective participation in decision-making, which is a threat to survival and dignity of the Amazonia population. Now I want to turn you back to the dialogue today that we're having, which is focusing on indigenous spirituality, traditional knowledge, and environmental protection. I would like to pause and reflect on why indigenous knowledge matters in the context of integral ecology. And to answer this question, I would like to share a personal reflection that I have only understood over the last years. Of course, no wondering how old I am. And I want to share this personal experience through a traditional ecological knowledge perspective, which is we are connected with everything. My grandmother would have been 94 years old this year in September, but she passed on 6 years ago. May her soul rest in peace. But what I want to share is what I remember from her, and that is her application of indigenous knowledge and appreciating nature. She would sing songs before the rain drops, demonstrating an attachment to rain, and this singing had a deep spiritual connection, which now, when I look back, after living with her for 20 years under the same roof, I never understood. But then now, I understand. She would also sense and connect what the different waves of wind meant and how it relates to the environmental connection. Every little living creature that would come across her, she would look at it with some deep connection. From my experience over the years, she many times mentioned how traditional cultural practices have been ignored and shared her wishes to have had information keepers listened to over the centuries. And now looking back on the knowledge that I noted then and barely understood, indeed, it was rooted in indigenous spirituality, traditional knowledge, and environmental protection. And for me personally, this is something that exceeds science itself, and that is why the spirituality, cultural practices, and songs come into play with law, with how people connect and manage resources, and how they think about them, and reminding us that we're all related. And this is something I think that I picked out from the video that was played before Dr. Mariam Rose spoke. This differs from what some call scientific or academic ecological knowledge, which often views humans as separate from nature. It's really about the relationship between people and the place where they live and the beings that are where they are. With all that I have said, I would like to summarize our perspectives and leave you with 3 lessons from Caritas. Firstly, we acknowledge and appreciate that indigenous relationship with their land offers further evidence of the critical role culture and indigenous knowledge can play in environmental justice. And not just environmental justice, but also social justice. Secondly, indigenous leadership is necessary, and I think it's evident from Dr. Mariam Rose. This leadership is necessary if ecological justice is to be achieved, as is support for advancing transformative and innovative solutions that account for all life. Thirdly, there is need for more dialogue, which must be developed and enhanced at different levels, stemming from the local level all the way up to the different spaces. Therefore, it is necessary that the analysis of the ecological crisis involves a dialogue of environmental ecology with economic, social, cultural, and everyday life ecology, including the perspectives of an ethics of the common good and justice between generations. Further, I also want to point you to ecological justice, which is an issue we all agree needs to be addressed together as one. This leaves us with a call to have ecological dialogue where we need to learn from new ways of caring and letting us embrace the knowledge that has existed since time immemorial. Further, and in sharing some key takeaways from the Caritas Australia statement, which was shared on Tuesday, where they analyze the unacceptable gap between the First Australians and other Australians across. In this statement, they acknowledge that the inequalities are the consequences of the failure to place First Australians at the center of decision making. In this statement, they repeat the call that First Australians have the solutions, and it is time for everyone else to listen and strongly believe that decisions must be made with them rather than for them. Lastly, and in terms of the Dadiri concept, which we appreciate so much as Caritas, I would like to bring forward the words of Pope Francis when he spoke about the Amazon region. He explained that when we make resolutions that affect the traditional custodians of the lands we inhabit, we should do this in the first place with the indigenous. He further stated that they are not just another party to be won over, or merely another individual seated at a table of equals, but stating that they are our principal dialogue partners, those from whom we have the most to learn from, to whom we need to listen out of a duty of justice, and from whom we must ask permission before presenting our proposals. Thank you very much for your attention.
It's just my pleasure to bring our gathering to an end. It's been a deeply moving experience. For myself, I come from a small island, the island of Ireland. And I think as I listened to you, Miriam Rose, the invitation that I heard within myself was to rediscover my indigenous soul. That the indigenous people of today and their long, long history are reminding us to remember where we came from. Our long histories, we have layers of so-called civilization. But ultimately, we came from the land. And I'm thinking of just a small example within my own culture. 3 years ago, I was visiting the west of Ireland when on holidays. And the local priest, celebrating the feast of the Irish saint of the neighbourhood, invited us to gather on the beach, on the strand, on an afternoon, to take off our shoes. When we went there, there were hundreds on the strand. To take off our shoes, to walk in the waters, and to look at the rocks. And there are 2 rock formations he pointed out. And he said, that's Laba Fiachna. That's the bed of Fiachna. The stones were in a particular shape. And that's the Cahir Fiachna, which is the chair of Fiachna. So depending on the tide on the feast day, you went to the Cahir, the chair, or you went to the bed. And the priest blessed the sand around the rock, because the tradition in that place was that the people going to sea, the seamen, took a bag of blessed sand with them on their journey to go fishing out into the wild Atlantic. And when the storms raged, their custom was to throw the sand into the raging storm and pray that God would calm the seas. And so this very enlightened and connected priest asked us to gather the sand. He even provided us with a plastic bag, and to bring the sand home with us, to remember our roots, and when the storms of life threaten, to bless ourselves with this sacred sand. So, Dr. Miriam Rose, you reminded me of water, rock, and sand. And you reminded me to, and all of us, I think, to rediscover our deepest connections with the earth, with people, with the universe. God bless you, and thank you.
She's the head of the... Well done. The head of the religious... she's the head of this place. She's Irish. Sister Pat. Yeah. Did you meet her?